Shalom. Before I start, I want to give all honors and glories and praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Wakakodash, Yahweh, which is the one true name of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one true name is Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, meaning coming in the name, Ba means coming in, Ha means the, Shah means name, Rakah means spirit, Kodash means holy. Double honors to the elders and the apostles and bishops of Great Millstone, who will well and teach well, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect, and shalom to you sincere brothers that are scattered abroad, pushing forth this word of truth and sincerity, and shalom to you sincere sisters that are listening in silence, as the scriptures command you to do so. I am the brother Mashiach Arazakah, and pretty much we're out on the guessing again to preach the gospel, to come out to the highways and edges. And in this camp lesson, we're pretty much going to go into the empires, and we're going to go into Daniel chapter 2, right, of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And then we're going to go through the spirit, Lord willing is edifying, going into the empires in this lesson. So Lord willing is edifying, all right, especially for you Jakes that's new in the truth. And we're going to go into Daniel chapter 2. Right, and we're going to break down from verse 31 on down, and we're going to go into the empires, okay? And this is also a refresher for myself, so Lord willing, this is edifying. This is Daniel chapter 2 and verse 31. It says, Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. It says, the great image whose brightness was excellent stood before thee, and form thereof was terrible. Verse 32. It says, this image's head was of fine gold. Now, this is going into that statue, right, of Nebuchadnezzar, right, where Nebuchadnezzar had that vision of that dream of that statue, right, and it had the head of gold, right, it had the silver, right, it had the brass, and it had the iron, and it had the iron and clay, okay? This is what it's going into, Nebuchadnezzar's vision of his dream of that statue, okay, which is going into the empires, okay? And it says, verse 32, verse 32, it says, this image's head was of fine gold, right? It says his breast and his arms of silver. It says his belly and his thighs of brass, right? Verse 33. It says his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay, right? And this is going into Nebuchadnezzar's dream, right? The statue, right? Which is referring to the different empires, which we're going to get right now, right? And it says, verse 34, it says, Thou shalt till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, right? And break them into pieces, right? And it says, verse 35, it says, Then was the iron and the clay and the brass and the silver and the gold broken into pieces together, right? It says, and became like the chaff that was it's like a chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carrying them away, right? That no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. And it says, this is the dream that we will tell the interpreted thereof before the king. And it says, Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the Most High of heaven have given thee the wisdom, power, and strength, and glory. And it says, verse 38, it says, and wheresoever the children of men dwell, it says, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven have he given into thine hand, and made thee ruler over them all. It says, Thou art this head of gold. Okay, and the head of gold, that's referring to the Babylonian Empire, okay, which is the lion. Okay, the lion, right, is the head of gold, which is the Babylonian Empire. Okay, that's the head of gold. And we're going to prove that going into Daniel 7. And we're going to start at verse 1. This is Daniel 7 and 1. It says, In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, and King Belshazzar, he was the last king to rule in Babylon. Okay, King Belshazzar, he was the last king to rule in Babylon. Okay, he was pretty much killed by Darius the Mede, because the Medes came in, right? And Darius the Mede, he killed King Belshazzar, right? And we can prove that. We're going to go back to that. Let's go to Daniel chapter 5, and I'm going to go straight to the main point. I will usually start at verse Daniel 5 and 24, but I'll just go straight to the main point. All right, this is Daniel 5, and I'll start at verse 28. Daniel 5 and 28, it says, Paris, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians, right? And the Medes, right? The Medes came in and took down King Belshazzar, right? And you had the Persians, right? They became the Medo-Persian Empire, okay? But we'll get to that in a little bit. But continuing, right? It says, verse 29, it says, Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Verse 30, it says, In that night was Belshazzar, right, king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Mede took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So there you go. King Belshazzar, he was the last king to rule in Babylon, because Darius the Mede, he came in there, and he killed King Belshazzar. Okay, the Medes came in. Darius the Mede came in. You had the Medes that came, and then the Persians came later, which the Persians, they were more mightier than the Medes. But continuing on. This is Daniel 7 and 1, going back to Daniel 7 and 1. So now we proved that King Belshazzar, he was the last king to rule in Babylon. Okay, Daniel 7 and 1, it says, In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed, right? And it says, Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matter. So it's pretty much what brothers do now. You have brothers that have different visions and different dreams, right? They tell their testimony of the vision of the dream, of what they saw, all right, what was in the dream, how the dream went, how it looked, how it was presented before them in that dream. Okay, it's the same thing what Daniel the prophet is doing here in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1. This is Daniel 7 and 2. It says, Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night. It says, And behold, 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. Right, and the great sea, that's referring to the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, that's the great sea. The great sea is referring to the Mediterranean Sea. All right, which the Mediterranean Sea, that's on the other side near Israel. Okay, because you got the Persian Gulf, right? From the Persian Gulf going all the way around into Israel, into Lower Egypt. That's the Fertile Crescent. And then you have right next to Lower Egypt, I'll say between Lower Egypt, Gaza, Israel, all that area right there, you have the sea that's right there. That's the Mediterranean Sea. That's that great sea. Okay? And it says verse 3, and it says, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. And the 4 beasts, all right, the 4 beasts, that's a representation of the 4 major empires. Okay, which is the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, and the Roman Empire. Okay? It says, verse 3, it says, And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. And we're going to prove that that's talking about the four major empires. Okay? This is Daniel 7 and 17. It says, These are the great beasts which are 4, right? And it says, Are 4 kings which shall arise out of the earth. Right? And the 4 beasts are the 4 kings, right? So that's referring to that's representing the 4 major empires. The Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, and the Roman Empire. Okay? So getting back to the main point, verse 3, it says, And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. Okay, again, we just proved it in the 17th verse of Daniel 7, that the 4 beasts there, that's referring to the 4 major empires. Okay, the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, Greek Empire, Roman Empire. Verse 4, and then we're going to go back to Daniel 2 after this precept here. This is Daniel 7 and 4. It says, The first was like a lion, right, and had eagle wings. This is a representation of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Okay, the Neo-Assyrian Empire, that's who is representing there. And if you go into go on Google and put in the Neo-Assyrian art, you'll see the statue and the painting of the body of the lion, right, and having the head, right, the head of the head is of the Assyrian, but it has a body of a lion and it has wings of an eagle. Okay, when you look at the art, the Assyrian art, you can look it up. Okay, go on Google, put in Neo-Assyrian Empire art, and they'll show the statue. You'll see the Assyrian head with the lion body with the eagle wings. That's representing the Assyrian Empire. Okay, the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Okay, and that's that. This is that one empire, which is going to go into the Assyrian Empire, and then the Babylonians came in and took down the Neo-Assyrian Empire, right? And it became the Babylonian Empire. Okay, which is one empire, which represents the head of gold. So this is what it's going into, because we read the head of gold in Daniel chapter 2, right? So this is Daniel 7:4. It says, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. It says, I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked. Okay, now the eagle's wings, again, is representing the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Okay, right? And it says, I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked. And the wings whereof they're plucked, that's referring to the rising of the Babylonian Empire. Okay, the rising of the Babylonian Empire. They took down the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Okay, they took down the Neo-Assyrian Empire. And if I'm not mistaken, that was around, I think, 539 BC or 586 BC. I could be wrong, but somewhere around that area, roughly paraphrasing, I think it was during that time. I think it was 539 BC or 586 BC, sometime around there, when the falling of, I think it was 586 BC. I think that was when the Babylonians took down the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Okay. And continuing, it says, and I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked. Again, this is representing the rising of the Babylonian Empire, taking down the Assyrian Empire. Okay, and it says, and it was lifted up from the earth, right, and made, it says, and made stand upon the feet as a man, right, as a man's heart was given unto it. And that's representing Nebuchadnezzar, because in that time Nebuchadnezzar, he had strong power in his might. Okay, in that time he was mighty in his time. Okay, and that's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, because Nebuchadnezzar came in, so they took down the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and it became the Babylonian Empire. So you had the Neo-Assyrian Empire, then the Babylonians came in and took down the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and it became the Babylonian Empire. That's one empire, which is the head of gold. So now, when we go back to Daniel chapter 2, and we read verse 38. It says, and wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowl of heaven, it says, have he given into thine hand, and have made thee ruler over them all. It says, thou art his head of gold. That's talking about the Babylonian Empire. Okay, which the Babylonian Empire is the head of gold, which is the lion. Okay, that's the Babylonian Empire. Okay, you had the Assyrian Empire, and the Babylonians took down the Assyrian Empire. That's one empire. That's the head of gold. So that head of gold there, that's talking about the Babylonian Empire, which is the lion. Okay. Verse 2, it says, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. And who's that kingdom? It says another kingdom shall rise up inferior to thee. Who is that kingdom that was inferior to the Babylonian Empire? The Medo-Persian Empire. Right? You had the Medes that came first, and then you had the Persians, right? We just read in Daniel 7:1, right? King Belshazzar, right? He was the last king to rule in Babylon. We went to Daniel 5, and we started at verse 28, right? And it said the Medes and the Persians, okay? So you had the Medes that came first, and the Medes, they go back to the line of Japheth, which is Madai, and then you have the Persians, they go back to the line of Shem, which goes to Elam. Okay, so you have the Medes, and then you had the Persians. And the Medes, they came in, and then the Persians were mightier. They came in. They took down the Medes, and they became the Medo-Persian Empire. And that's what we're getting into right here. That's that other key. That's that another kingdom inferior to the Medo-Persian Empire, which is representing the silver. Okay, which is the bear. This is Daniel chapter 2, in verse 39. And it says, after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third. It says, and there shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. Okay, that's the Medo-Persian Empire, which you're going to read. Because if I read the next part, that's going into the Greek Empire, which we ain't there yet. So let's go to Daniel 7 and verse 5. This is Daniel 7 and 5, and this is the Medo-Persian Empire that was inferior to thee, inferior to the Babylonian Empire. All right. This is Daniel 6 and verse 5. It says, and behold, another beast, a second. Okay, who is that second beast? All right, the Medo-Persian Empire. But you had the Medes that came first. Okay, it says, and behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear. Okay, like to a bear. This is the Medo-Persian Empire that it's talking about. Okay, and it says, it rise up on one side. Right, it says, it rise up itself on one side. Right. Because it was rise up on one side, because you had the Persians that were mightier than the Medes. Okay, So this is talking about the Medes and the Persians. Okay? And we're going to prove it in this lesson real quick, but I'll read it again. Daniel 7 and verse 5, it says, "And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it rised up itself on one side," right? And we're going to prove, actually I'll read the whole thing. It says, rise up on one side, Salakia. It says, "And it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it." Right, and the 3 ribs, it says, "And it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it." That's referring to the locations that they went. They went northward, westward, southward, which is representing the first 3 cities that they conquered, which was Media, Lydia, and Babylonia. Okay, Media, Libya, and Babylonia. Those were the 3 first cities that they conquered. That's why they went northward, westward, and southward. Okay, so it was meaning Media, Libya, and Babylonia. Those are the first 3 cities that they conquered. That's why they went northward, westward, and southward. And that's why it says right here, which I'm going to prove that they went northward, westward, and southward. I'm going to prove that when we go to Daniel 8, which I'm going to get out to back this up. Okay? Daniel 7 and 5, it says, "And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side," right? "And it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it." And that's referring to the locations. They went northward, southward, and westward. And those places that they went, northward, southward, and westward, was Media, Libya, and Babylonia. Okay? And let's prove that. It says, and they continue, it says, and we're gonna prove that. "And they said thus unto it, Arise and devour much flesh," because they were mighty in their time. Okay, you had the Persians that were mighty, but the Medes were mighty. The Persians were mightier than the Medes. So you had the Medes that were mighty, but the Persians were mightier than the Medes. Okay? And that's why it talks about one horn being higher than other. And that's why it mentions the 2 horns. Okay? Because the 2 horns is representing 2 nations. They're 2 different nations as well. Right? Because you had the Medes that go off the line of Japheth. Those are the Japhites, the Medes. Right? And then you had the Persians that came, which the Persian, they go off of the line of Shem. Okay? The Persians go off the line of Shem, which is Elam. So the 2 horns represent the 2 nations, which was the Medes and the Persians. And the Medes, again, they go from the line of Japheth, and you have the Persians, they go off the line of Elam, which is Shem. Okay? So getting back to that, this is Daniel 8, because I want to prove that they went to the locations that they went, right? I mentioned that in Daniel 7 and 5, that they went northward, westward, and they went southward, right? So we're going to prove that right here. This is Daniel 8, and I'm going to get to the main point. This is Daniel 8, and we'll start at verse 3. It says, "Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns." Okay? And the ram that had 2 horns, that's referring to the 2 nations. Because the nations, there were 2 different nations. There are 2 nations, right? Which was the Medes, which goes off of the line of Japheth. They're the Japhites. The Medes were, right? And then you had the Persians that came after, which is of the line of Shem, which goes back to Elam. Okay? And the Persians, again, the Medes, they go from Japheth, which was Madai. That's who they descend from. And then you had the Persians, they go back to Elam, which is Shemites. They Shem. Okay? They go off the line of Shem. So that's the 2 horns there, right? And it says, "And the 2 horns were high." So both of the horns was high, but one was higher than the other. That's why the scripture said one was lifted up on one side when we went to Daniel 7 and verse 5, right? And it said, this is Daniel 8 and verse 3. And it said, continuing, it says, "Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other." You see that? They were both high, but one was higher than the other. Remember, we read in Daniel 7 and 5, one was lifted up on one side. That's talking about the Persians, because the Persians was mightier than the Medes. Okay? And it says, "And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other." And the one that was higher than the other were the Persians. Okay? It says, "But one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last." And the higher that came up last was the Persians. So you had the Medes that came first, then you had the Persians. Okay? Continuing. Verse 4, it says, and I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward. Remember, the 3 ribs in the mouth of it, when you go to Daniel 7 and 5, that's referring to the locations that they went. They went westward, northward, and southward. And those areas that they went to, those 3 cities that they went to, that they conquered, those 3 areas that they went westward, northward, and southward, was Media, Libya, and Babylonia. Those were the cities that they conquered, that they went to. Okay? And that's what that's talking about there. That's where it says the 3 ribs in the mouth of it and between the teeth of it. That's talking about the locations that they went and the areas that they conquered. Media, Libya, and Babylonia. Okay? And it says, continuing, and it says, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand, right? No beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great, right? And then what they became, that's the Medo-Persian Empire, because you had the Medes, right? The Medes came first, right? And then the Persians came after. And when the Medes, they fell to the Persians, so they became the Medo-Persian Empire. And we're going to prove that the ram, that's in Daniel 8, right? And also the bear, which is in Daniel 7, is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire, which is that bear, which is that silver, okay? That was mentioned in Daniel, the 2nd chapter. That's the Medo-Persian Empire, which is the silver. And verse 20, this is Daniel 8 and 20, because we're going to prove that this is that ram there is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay, also that bear is the same thing. Okay, Daniel 8 and 20, it says, the ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. So there you go. So again, when you see the ram in Daniel 8, and you read Daniel 8 and Daniel 8 and started at verse 3, right? So that ram there, that's talking about the Medo-Persian Empire. You had the Medes, and then you had the Persians that came after. Now again, the Medes, they descend from Japheth. Okay, they descend from Japheth, which goes back to Madai. And then you had the Persians, they go back to the line of Shem, which they go back to Elam. Okay, so you had the Medes that came, and then the Medes fell to the Persians. The Persians came after. Okay? The Persians came after. This is Daniel 8 and 20. It says, the ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. There you go. That's that ram there. So that ram, that's to prove that that ram there, also going to Daniel 7, which is the bear, is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay? So now let's go back to that. Let's go back to Daniel 7, right? And then we're going to go back to Daniel 2. So this is Daniel 7. Daniel 7 and verse 5. And then we're going to go back to Daniel 2. Okay? Daniel 7 and 5. It says, and behold, another beast, a second, right? And that second, right? Like to a bear. This is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire. Alright? It says, and it rise itself up on one side. And remember, the reason why it was rise up on one side, because one was mightier than the other. So both horns was high, right? It goes into the 2 horns, which is representing the 2 nations, which is the Medes, which the Medes go back to Madai, which is the line of Japheth. And you have the Persians going back to Elam, which is the line of Shem. They're 2 nations, okay? The Medes came, and then the Persians came after. So the Persians were mightier than the Medes. That's why one was lifted up on one side. You had one horn that was higher than the other, okay? So remember, that's talking about the Persians being mightier than the Medes, right? And it says, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. Again, we read that in Daniel 8, which was referring to the locations and areas that they conquered and where they went, which was westward, northward, and southward, which was Media, Libya, and Babylonia. Okay? Continuing, and it said, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it, and they said thus unto it, arise and devour much flesh. Okay? Because they were mighty. Okay? So now, that's to prove there that the Medo-Persian Empire, okay? That's the Medo-Persian Empire, which is that silver there. So now let's go back to Daniel chapter 2, and we're going to read verse 39. It says, and after these shall arise another kingdom that was inferior to thee. So we proved that that's the Medo-Persian Empire, which the Medo-Persian Empire is the bear, which is mentioned in Daniel 7 and 5, right? That's the Medo-Persian Empire, which is the bear, which is the silver, okay? Which we read right here, right? It said, I actually want to go back up to prove that. Where it said, right here, it said, let's read it. Daniel 2 and 32, it says, the image of the head was of fine gold. That's the Babylonian Empire, okay? And it says, whose brightness was excellent, right? And it said, I went up, verse 32, it says, this image's head was of fine gold. That's the Babylonian Empire. His breast and his arms of silver. That's the Medo-Persian Empire, which represents the bear, okay? So I just want to read that. So now let's get to the next one. This is Daniel chapter 2, and we're going to go back to verse 39. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of the brass. Okay, and the third kingdom of the brass, that's talking about the Greek Empire. Okay, the Greek Empire came and took down the Medo-Persian Empire, which was Alexander the Greek. Okay, now let's read this. This is Daniel chapter 2. And verse 39, it says, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And this is talking about Alexander the Greek, okay, the Greek Empire, which is talking about that leopard, okay, referring to that leopard there. We're going to prove that. This is Daniel 7 and verse 6. It says, and after this I beheld, and lo, another, it says, it's like it. Daniel 7 and 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard. Okay, and the leopard is referring to the Greek Empire, also Alexander the Greek. Okay, Alexander the Greek came in and took down the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay, and Alexander the Greek. Okay, Alexander the Greek, he took down the Medo-Persian Empire and conquered, and he was ruling during that time. He was ruling in that time. He was ruling that whole thing. Okay, he was the ruler of that place. He conquered Egypt. He conquered Alexandria. He conquered Macedonia. He conquered all those areas. He conquered the whole thing. And he reigned for 12 years. And then he wound up dying after those 12 years. And then it mentions of his generals taking over. Now, Alexander the Greek, he had prominent generals. He had many generals, but the scriptures only mention the main four, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But I just want to sum that up. So Alexander the Great, he's that leopard. Okay, it's talking about the Greek Empire and Alexander the Great, okay, which he winded up ruling and taking down the Medo-Persian Empire, and he conquered everything. He ruled Egypt, he ruled Alexandria, Macedonia, right, all that whole region over there. He ruled all of that, okay, he ruled all of that. Alexander the Greek, he ruled all of that. So he's that leopard, and when it says the leopard there, Daniel 7, it's talking about Alexander the Greek and the Greek Empire. So the Medo-Persian Empire fell to the Greek Empire, and the Greek Empire came in around 331, 332 BC, right? Alexander Greek, he ruled from I think 331 or 332 BC, and he died in 331 or 332 BC, somewhere around there, right? Somewhere around there, he reigned for 12 years, right? He winded up dying though. But getting back to this is Daniel 7. And we're going to get to verse 6 again. It says, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard. And that leopard there, that's talking about Alexander the Greek and the Greek Empire. It says, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads. All right, so the 4 wings of the fowl and the beast had also 4 heads. That's talking about the same thing, which that's represented Alexander the Greek's generals. Okay, he had many generals, but the scriptures only mention the main 4, which was Ptolemy, Cassador, Seleucus, and Lysimachus. Okay, Ptolemy, Cassador, Seleucus, and Lysimachus. Those, you also had Antigonus there, the prominent generals, right? But the scriptures only mention the main 4, which was Ptolemy, Cassador, Seleucus, and Lysimachus. Okay, and it says the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Right. So this is talking about the Greek Empire. And this is during the time, again, once the Greek Empire came in, okay, this is when the Israelites became Hellenized. right? When you go into First Maccabees and Second Maccabees, that's when the Israelites began to get that Hellenization, right? The Hellenization period where they were Hellenized, and they started following the ways of the Greeks. They couldn't keep their Hebrewic ceremonial traditions. They couldn't keep the Sabbaths. They couldn't circumcise their children. They couldn't keep their high holy days. If they were caught doing any of that, they were executed and put to death. This is going into the time of the Hellenization period. This is the ruling of the Greek Empire. Okay, that's a whole other subject, but I wanted to mention this. Okay, so this is why those Israelites that were of the flesh became Greek and became heathens and became Gentiles, because during the time of Alexander the Greek, during the Hellenization period, the Israelites were Hellenized. Okay, so we're going to prove and sum this up that this is that leopard there is talking about Alexander the Greek. All right, and we're going to get that in the Apocrypha, and this is I think it'll be First Maccabees. That's what I want to know. First Maccabees chapter 6. Oops, that's 5. And yeah, I'm gonna make sure I'm in the right scripture. I think First Maccabees 1. I'm tripping. Salakia. It's First Maccabees 1. That's what I want to do. Yeah. First Maccabees chapter 1. Salakia. Yeah. This is First Maccabees, the first chapter. Salakia. I was thinking about the Israelites being Hellenized, but I want to get about Alexander the Greek. This is First Maccabees. Bear with me. This is First Maccabees 1:1. It says, and it happened after that Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, and had smitten Darius, the king of the Persians and the Medes. So you see that? The Greek Empire took down the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay? They took them down. They took over. The Greeks did. Right? And it says that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. You see that? I'm talking about Alexander the Great. Verse 2, this is First Maccabees chapter 1 and 2. It says he made many wars and won every stronghold and slew the kings of the earth. And he did. Alexander the Greek, he conquered everything. Okay, he conquered everything. He took down all the other kingdoms. He took down those and he ruled them. Right? He ruled Egypt, Alexandria, Macedonia, Babylon. He took over all of that. He ruled all of that. Alexander the Greek ruled all of that. Okay? He took over everything. Right? And it says, and he made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. Verse 3, and it says, and went through the ends of the earth and took spoils in many nations, and so much that the earth was quiet before him. It says, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. Verse 4, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries, nations, and kings who became tributaries unto him. Verse 5, and after these things he fell sick, right, and perceived that he should die, right? Because Alexander the Greek, once he conquered everything, he became sick, okay, and he wound up passing, okay, right? He became sick, and continuing, right? Let's continue. It says verse 3, it says, and went through the ends of the earth, right? It says, and took spoils of many nations. It says, in so much that the earth was quiet before him. It says, whereas he was exalted and his heart was lifted up, right? And it says, verse 4, and it says, he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. Verse 5, and it says, after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. You see that? Verse 6, and it says, whereof he called his servants, it says he calls his servants such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them. Right? And that's talking about his generals. Continuing, and it says, while he was yet alive. It says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. It says, and his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And you see that? They bare ruled every servant of his place, because you had his generals that took over. When we go into the Diadochi Wars, right? You had Ptolemy. Each general of Alexander Greek had conquering of each area that Alexander Greek had took over. Each section was ruled by his generals, right? Like you had Ptolemy, he ruled Alexandria to Egypt, right? And then you had Lysimachus, he ruled Macedonia, right? So you had you had Alexander's generals ruled certain areas, okay? Ruled those areas after the death of Alexander Great, and they began to rule, okay? And they took over. And it says, and his servants bare ruled everyone in his place, right? Because after the death of Alexander the Great, his generals took over. So now, when we go back to Daniel 7, we'll go back to Daniel 7, right? This is Daniel 7, and this is Daniel 7, and Daniel 7 and where was I left? Well, I'm trying to think where I left off. 6. So now Daniel 7 and 6. Salakia. Daniel 7 and 6. It says, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, and it says, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. It says, the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. This is talking about Alexander the Greek and his empire. Okay, this is talking about Alexander the Greek and his empire. Okay, and Alexander the Greek, again, he ruled. He took down the Medo-Persian Empire. He ruled, and then after the death of Alexander the Greek, he fell sick and died. His generals took over. Okay, and that goes into the Diadochi Wars. And then when you go into the Diadochi Wars, the 4 generals started battling each other, wanting to conquer certain areas, battling each other. You had the Seleucid Empire. Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, he was trying to take down, I believe, Ptolemy, right? Trying to take down Ptolemy, right? Trying to take over Egypt. And I think he wound up conquering. Can't really remember. Don't want to give out the wrong information. But it's been a minute. But I believe he wound up conquering or something like that. But Ptolemy wound up fleeing. But yeah, that's going into the Greek Empire. Okay, so now, let's read again. Daniel 7 and 6. It says, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, right, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of the fowl. It says, the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given into it. All right, and dominion was given into it. Okay, so this is talking about the Greek Empire. Okay, this is referring to the Greek Empire. So now we're going to go back to Daniel chapter 2. This is Daniel chapter 2. And this is Daniel chapter 2. And we're going to start at, because I left off with the 3rd. So we read verse 39 again, which is going into the Medo-Persian Empire, Greek Empire, and then we're going to go into Roman Empire right now. Daniel chapter 2 and 39. It says, after thee, it says, shall arise another kingdom, right? And it says, after thee there shall rise another kingdom inferior to thee. It says, in another 3rd kingdom of brass, it says, which shall be ruled over all the earth, right? And again, it says, and after thee shall arise another kingdom, again, inferior to thee. That's the Medo-Persian Empire. And it says, and another 3rd kingdom of brass, okay, which that's talking about the Greek Empire, right? It says, which shall bear rule over all the earth, okay? And the bear right there, I mean the 3rd kingdom, that's the Greek Empire, okay? Salakia, that's the Greek Empire over all the earth. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 40. And it says, and the 4th kingdom shall be strong as a lion. It says, and the 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron. Salakia. Salakia, read it again. Daniel 2 and 40. Salakia. It says, and the 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron. Not a lion. Iron. Right? For as much as iron breaketh into pieces, and so do all things. And this 4th kingdom, that's referring to the Roman Empire, okay, which is of iron, which we're going to get in Daniel, the 7th chapter. All right, this is Daniel chapter 7, right, and verse 7. And it says, after this I saw in the night visions. It says, and behold, a 4th beast. It says, behold, a 4th beast. And the 4th beast, that's the Roman Empire. Okay, that's the fourth beast, the iron. They had great iron. Okay, that's the Roman Empire, the fourth beast. Right? This is Daniel 7. And Daniel 7. This is Daniel 7 and verse 7. It says, and after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast. It says dreadful and terrible, right? It says and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It says it devoured and brake in pieces and stamped residue with the feet of it, right? And this is talking about the Roman Empire. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, right? And it had 10 horns. Now the 10 horns that's in Daniel 7, that's not talking about the same 10 horns that's mentioned in Revelations. Okay, this is a different 10 horns. Alright? But it talks about the Roman Empire. This is the Roman Empire, which is of great iron. They had the great iron. Okay? This is to prove that it's the Roman Empire. I was thinking about that. We're going to prove that this is the Roman Empire, going back to Daniel 7 and 2. Bear with me. Right? That was the proof that was the Roman Empire. Okay? Daniel 2 and verse 40. It says, and the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much iron breaketh in pieces and subdue all things. It says, and as the iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Okay? And that's the proof right there that that's talking about the Roman Empire. Okay, Daniel 7, and this is Daniel 7 and verse 7. Daniel 7 and 7. It says, after this I saw in night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, right, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue, right, with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, right? And it had 10 horns, all right? So this is talking about the Roman Empire here, okay? That's what this is talking about, the Roman Empire. This is literally referring to the Roman Empire, okay? So that's to prove that it was referring to the Roman Empire, okay? And they had a lot of iron. They had great iron. Okay, they ruled everything with that iron. They took down the Greek Empire. Okay, the Roman Empire did. They took down the Greek Empire. Daniel chapter 2 and continuing. This is verse 41. Daniel 2 and 41. It says, whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, it says the kingdom shall be divided. It says, but there shall be in it of strength of iron, of the iron. It says, for as much as thou sawest, it says the iron mixed with iron and clay. All right, and the iron and clay, that's referring to the divided kingdoms, which also led to the revival of the Roman Empire. That's the iron and clay. Okay, that's the iron and clay, and we can get Revelation 17. That's the iron and clay there, right? Which is the revival of the Roman Empire, right? This is Revelation 17 and 1. It says, and there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither. It says, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore, right, that sitteth upon the waters. And the great whore, that's talking about America, okay? That's that great whore there, right, which is America, okay? And then actually, I should have got out. Let me go back to Daniel chapter 7 real quick, and then we'll go back to Daniel. We'll go to Revelation 17. I want to go back because you mentioned about the iron and clay. I should have got out that little horn first. This is Daniel 7 and 8, and then we'll go to Revelation 17. This is Daniel 7 and 8. It says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. Now that little horn there, that's referring to America, okay? That's that little horn. That little horn there is America, okay? Because America is the 8th head that comes out amongst the 7 heads, okay? And the mother of America, is Great Britain, okay, which is the seven heads. So America comes out amongst the seven heads, which we can prove that in Revelation 17 and 11. It says, this is Revelation 17:11. It says, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth. You see that? And it says, and of the seven, and goeth into perdition. You see that? That's talking about America. America is the eighth head that comes out amongst the seven. And the mother of the eighth head, which is America, is the mother which is the mother of the eighth head, which is America, is Great Britain, which comes out amongst the seven heads. Okay? So the eighth head is America. America comes out among the seven. Okay? It says, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seventh, and goeth into perdition. And there you go. You see that? So America is the eighth head, okay, that comes out amongst the seven heads. Okay, which the seven heads, all right, is the Greeks. I think it's the Greeks. The British, right? Germania Minor, the Spanish, the French, the Romans, Germania Major. Those are the seven heads. Okay, but you have America that's comes out. America is the eighth head, which comes out amongst the seven heads. Okay, which the mother of America is Great Britain. All right, so now we prove that. So now when we read Daniel 7 and verse 8, it says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them, right, among them another little horn, right? It says, before whom there were three of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And the three horns that were plucked up by the roots, that was the Spanish, the French, right? I think it was the Spanish, the French, and the British. Okay, those are the three horns plucked up by the roots, was the Spanish, the French, and the British. Okay, Daniel 7, right? And it says, before whom there were three of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and behold, in his horn were eyes like the eyes of men, and a mouth speaking great words. And this is talking about America, speaking of their military might, right? And America, they brag about their military might. But these other countries, they see how America became. They became weak. They see how weak America has become. So now that we know and understand, reading in the scriptures, that the little horn there, that's America. Okay, the little horn, okay, that's America. Which America is the eighth head that comes out amongst the seven heads. Okay, America is the eighth head that comes out amongst the seven heads. All right. This is Revelation. Now we're gonna go to Revelation 17, because now that we can prove, all right, that America is the modern day Roman Empire. Okay, going back to the NATO, right? The EU, known as the EEC, the Economic European Community, the EEC, the Economic European Community, right? EEC, known as the EU, right? Known as the EU, the European Union, right? The European Economic Community, right? Which was funded in 1949, right? So this is what it's going into, all right? So that's the Roman Empire today, the revival of the Roman Empire, right? It began during the Dark Ages, right? We were ruling, we wound up falling, and then the Edomites winded up ruling, right? Going into the Flavian dynasty, right? So you had during that time. So during the Dark Ages, from the beginning of the Dark Ages, which was from the 1400s, right? It was the beginning of the 1400s, right? All the way down to this present time now, okay? So that's the revival of the Roman Empire, okay? Which you can read that in the 1,000-year period. You can read that in Revelations 20. All right, and continuing. Revelation 17 and verse 1. Now we go to Revelation 17, right? So that little horn is America, okay? And the revival of the Roman Empire, that's the iron and clay, talking about the divided kingdoms, okay? This is Revelation 17 and 1. It says, and there came one of the seven angels, which had the seven bells, and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore, which that great whore is America, right? That sitteth upon many waters. And the many waters is referring to the many people, the nations, right? The people, right? That's what the waters is referring to, people. Because when you go into the Greek word of waters there, it goes into the Greek word idor or udor, which means many nations, many people. Okay, many people. All right, many nations. Okay, and we can prove that that's referring to people. When you go to Revelation 17:15, and it says, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So there you go. That's referring to the people there, right? Revelation 17:2, it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the habitations of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. All right, and that includes these 17. That includes these 16 heathen nations, because Esau is ruling, right? And all these nations follow after America. All right, so these 17 heathen nations in total, putting Esau in there, makes 17. All right, they're all literally drunken of the wine, which is the philosophies, the politics, and false religions. And our people is also included in that. 2/3 of our people are also included in that, because they're drunken of that wine. Okay, our people are literally lying in bed with the whore. All right, you got these 17 heathen nations. They're all literally on the same currency as America, which is the modern day Roman Empire. Okay, Revelation 17 and verse 2, and it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Can you see that? So they're drunken of the wine of this society, right? And it says, verse 3, it says, so he carried me away in spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet covered beast. And that woman that sit upon the scarlet covered beast, that's talking about the NATO, okay, which is known as the EEC, right? The European Economic Community, right? Known as the EU, the European Union, right? Funded in 1949, right? Which is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That's the modern day Roman Empire. That's the revival of the Roman Empire, which is the iron and clay. Okay, that's that scarlet covered beast, right? And it says full of names and of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the 7 heads I just quoted earlier, that's the Greeks, the British, Germania Minor, the Spanish, the French, the Romans, and Germania Major. Those are the 7 heads. And then you have the 10 horns, right? It says in 10 horns. And the 10 horns, that's referring to France, West Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Denmark, Greece, Ireland, and England. Okay, those are the 10 horns. Okay, so that's talking about the 10 horns there, right? And it says, verse 4, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet covered, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. It says, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And that's America. Okay, this place is built off of wickedness. Okay, of her fornication, right? Our people are drunken of that wine. They're full in her abominations and filthiness. Okay, the philosophies, politics, and the false religions, right? And it says, Revelation 17 and 5, and it says, upon her forehead was a name written. It says, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, right? And Babylon is no longer a mystery, because when John the Revelator was saying this here in his time, Babylon was a mystery, because ancient Babylon fell already during his time. So it was a mystery in his time. But now in this present time, now us being in this place called America, okay, it's no longer a mystery, because the present time prophets now, in this present time now, we know that America is Babylon the Great. So it's no longer a mystery. So this is talking about a Babylon the Great, which is America. Okay. Verse 6, it says, and I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, which are the Israelites. The saints are the Israelites. And with the blood of the Marith of Yahushai. And when I saw her, I wounded with great admiration. You see that? With great admiration. And it says, verse 7, and the angel said unto me, whether didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carried her. It says, which have 7 heads and 10 horns. All right, and we went into the 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, so America is the modern day Roman Empire, going back to the NATO. Okay, they're the modern day Roman Empire today, which is the iron and clay, right? And their power structure is going to be brought down. Okay, and I'm gonna get that out. All right, and then we'll wrap it up with that. This is their power structure is going to be brought down, right? Which I can get in Isaiah 14 and 12, and then we'll get out Luke 10 and 18, and then we'll get out Revelations 13, and then after that we'll get the falling of Babylon the Great, and then we'll wrap it up with that. Sum this up. I don't want to make this too long. There's a lot more scriptures I could get out, but I don't want to make this lesson too overlong. This camp lesson. But this is Isaiah 14, and then we're going to read 12. It's Isaiah 14 and 12, and it says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" It says, "How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations?" Right? So this scripture here is not talking about the angelic Satans being kicked out of heaven. This is a stumbling block for a lot of jakes. Okay, it's a stumbling block for a lot of these jakes, especially these jakes that's in the religion of Christianity. It's a huge stumbling block. Okay? And to that brother that said that, there's people behind me, if you can see right here in the video too. You said you need to go to places where there's people, but there's people right here behind me, brother. And there's people walking around. I just don't got the camera showing them. I'm just preaching the gospel, but yeah, you see those men. There's also like a couple of people right here walking by. There's people walking by where I'm at. All right? So just want to be that. It's not pride. I'm just letting you know there's people walking around where I'm at. I just don't want to be in the sun and my phone overheats. That's why I'm in the shade. All right? So to that brother that said that, later down the line when you watch this video, you just seen people, and there's people walking by right here too. I'm not just to show that there's people around. I'm just focused on preaching the gospel. That's what matters. And that's the thing with Jake. They always want to see action, actual people walking by. We preaching the gospel. There's people walking by out here. Okay? We don't. If they want to come and seek to get the truth, they gonna come here and get it and ask questions. If not, then we just gonna keep pushing. Our main thing is to get the gospel. So even though I'm doing a video and you guys don't see people walking around, because I'm not fit to show those people, they walking by, why do I need to show them when I'm preaching the gospel? They got questions, they can come up and ask, you know. But getting back to this, Isaiah 14 and verse 12, it says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" It says, "How art thou cast down to the ground?" It says, "Which didst weaken the nations." Okay, now you got people, they'll read Isaiah 14 and 12, right? And they'll say, "Oh, see, this is Lucifer, the angelic Satan, getting kicked out of heaven because he rebelled against the Lord." But that's not what this scripture is talking about here. So when it says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer," this isn't talking about the angelic Satan. When you go into the blue letter of this word Lucifer here, it goes into I think the Hebrew word H1966, H1966, something like that. It goes into the meaning of the word light bearer. Okay, that's what it goes into. That word Lucifer there goes into light bearer. And who are those light bearers? That's the world on the earth. It's referring to an actual group, a particular organization, right? And when you go into the etymology, the meaning of the word light bearer there, it means to enlighten. When you look up enlighten, right? Because that word enlighten means Illuminati. When you look up Illuminati, it's like if you go into the meaning of the word Illuminati, because that's that group, that's that Lucifer there, light bearers. Okay, and when you look up light bearers, you go into the word Illuminati. Actually, it goes into meaning the word light bearer. You look up, not light bearer, enlighten. Salakia. The word Illuminati means to enlighten. Okay, so I'm getting all confused. Salakia. Start over. So I'll read again because I'm confusing. It says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer?" So when you go into the meaning of that word Lucifer, it goes into H19, I think 66, right? And it goes into light bearer. The light bearers are who? Known as the Illuminati. When you go into the etymology of the meaning of the word Illuminati there, it means enlighten. That's what Illuminati means, enlighten. When you look up in Google and put in enlighten, meaning of the word enlighten, it means someone given of great knowledge. That's what that's talking about. Someone given of great knowledge. Okay? And a person that is given of great knowledge is Esau Edom, right?
but he has the knowledge on the left-hand side, right? So that's who that's talking about there. It's not talking about the angelic Satan, okay? This is Isaiah 14, and Isaiah 14 and verse 12. It says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? It says, son of the morning, how art thou cut down from the ground? How is thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? You see that? This is talking about Esau, Edom, right? This is talking about Esau, his power structure being brought down, right? Because when you go into Luke, which is another precept I'm going to get in this lesson, chapter 10 and verse 18, it's talking about the same exact thing. This is Luke 10 and 18. And it says, and he said unto them, it says, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Now, when you go into the meaning of that word heaven there, in Luke 10 and 18, it goes into the Greek word aranios, which means power, power structure. So when you go into Isaiah 14 and 12 and Luke 10 and 18, it's talking about and referring to the same thing, which is talking about Esau's power structure being brought down. This place called America, which is Babylon the Great, which is the modern day Roman Empire, modern day Egypt, modern day Rome, it's going to be destroyed. It's going to be destroyed. The Lord is going to destroy Esau's rulership, and he's going to set his kingdom on the planet Earth. Okay? That's what that's talking about. That's what that's going into. Okay? That's going into Esau's power structure. Okay? Right? Read that again. Luke 10:18. And it says, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. And this is talking about Esau's power structure being brought down. Okay? That's what that's talking about. Same thing with Isaiah 14 and 12. Okay? Now I'm going to get out that other precept, Revelations, right? Actually, not Revelation. The Spirit just hit me. I'll get out 1 Corinthians 15, right? Because we're going to prove that Esau's power structure is going to be taken down. The Lord Yahushua, he's going to come back. He's going to destroy Esau's kingdom. He's going to set his kingdom on the planet Earth, right? Which I can get out in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 23. This is 1 Corinthians 15 and 23. We're going to get to the main point. And it says, but every man in his own order, Yahushua is the first fruits, right? Which is the elect. Those are the first fruits. And it says, afterward, they that are Yahushua's at his coming. And that's the hopeful elect. Okay? We're hoping for the Lord's coming, right? And it says, verse 24, and it says, then cometh the end, right? The end of what? The end of age, the end of Esau's rulership. That's why when you go into Isaiah 14 and 12 and Luke 10 and 18, it talks about the falling, right? It's talking about Esau's rulership being brought down, right? It says, verse 24, then cometh the end, right? When he shall deliver, when he shall deliver up the kingdom of the Most High, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule, all authority, and all power, right? Because the Lord Yahushua, when he comes back, he's going to destroy Esau's rulership. He's going to take down Esau, right? And he's going to set his kingdom on the planet Earth, right? And when you go into Revelations 21, which I'll get in a minute, right? It says, 1 Corinthians 15:24, it says, then cometh the end, right? The end of Esau's rulership, the end of age. 2nd Esdras 6 and 9, right? When he shall have delivered up the kingdom to the Most High, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule, all authority, and power. Talking about Esau's power structure. His power structure, his kingdom is going to be taken down. His kingdom going to be brought down, right? The Lord Yahushua, he's going to come back, and he's going to destroy Esau's rulership, and he's going to set his kingdom on the earth. The kingdom of heaven is going to be established on the earth, but Esau's rulership got to be taken down first. Okay? Verse 26, it says, the last enemy shall be destroyed is death, right? This place called America, which is Babylon the Great, which is modern day Egypt, right? Modern day Rome is going to be taken down. Yahushua is going to take down Esau's rulership. Verse 26, it says, the enemy that shall be destroyed, it says, the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. Verse 27, it says, for he hath put all things under his feet, but when he saith all things are put under him, it is manifested that he is accepted when did which did put all things under him. You see that? Verse 28, and when all things shall be subdued unto him, talking about Yahushua, right? It says, and when all things shall be subdued unto him, then shall the Son also himself be subjected unto him that put all things under him, right? It says that the Most High may be all in all, right? You see that? Yahushua is going to come back, and he's going to destroy Esau's rulership, which right now, this is modern day Rome, modern day Egypt, right? Babylon the Great. It's going to be taken down. The Lord is going to take down Esau's rulership, and he's going to set his kingdom on the earth. The kingdom of heaven is going to be established on the earth. We can prove that in Revelations 21:1, right? Revelations chapter 21:1. It says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, right? A new heaven and a new earth, right? That new heaven and a new earth, that's referring to a new rulership, which is going to be of Yahushua, right? Yahushua is going to come back, and he's going to set the kingdom of heaven is going to be established on the earth, right? And the kingdom of heaven, right? Yahushua, he's going to come with his rulership, and his rulership is going to be in total righteousness, okay? It says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and it says, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. You see that? The first heaven and the first earth that passed away, that's talking about Esau's rulership, right? Esau's kingdom. It's going to be taken down. Going back to Isaiah 14:12 and Luke 10:18, okay? And it says, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. All right, there was no more sea. You see that? No more sea, right? And the sea, that's talking about the people, which we read earlier in Revelations 17:1, right? Good. That word waters there in Revelation 17:1 goes to the Greek word udor, which means many nations, many people, right? You go down to verse 15 of Revelation 17. It tells you that the waters is referring to the peoples, tongues, and nations. It's talking about the people, okay? That's talking about, right? And it says, verse 2, it says, and I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, right? And that New Jerusalem there, that's referring to the elect of the nation of Israel. That's that New Jerusalem, okay? That's that New Jerusalem. It says, coming down for the Most High out of heaven, prepared as a bride adored to her husband, right? And that husband, right, that husbandman there, that's Yahushua, okay? And the bride, that's Israel, okay? And that bride there, that's Israel, okay? That's that bride. That bride is Israel, okay? The elect of the nation of Israel, that New Jerusalem, we're going to be a bride adored to her husband, and that husbandman is Yahushua, okay? That's going into the elect of the nation of Israel, right? That's that new Jerusalem there. It says, verse 3, and I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of the Most High is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and the Most High himself shall be with them and be their power. This is going into the elect, okay? The elected nation of Israel being adored to their husbandmen, right? That's that going into that joint hairs there, right? We're going to be those joint hairs. Now, the main point I wanted to prove, though, going back up to Revelation 21:1, it says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. That's talking about a new rulership, right? For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. That's talking about Edom's rulership, his power structure being brought down, right? It says, and there was no more sea, meaning the people. So this place called America is going to be destroyed. It's going to be taken down. Yahushua is going to take down Esau's rulership. And he's going to set his kingdom on the earth. The kingdom of heaven is going to be on the earth. And I'm going to prove that, right? Because I keep saying it over and over and over. But I got to bring it out, right? Revelations, I'll start at verse 10. Revelations 5:10, and it says, and has made us unto our power kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. You see that? So the kingdom of heaven is going to be on the earth. Okay, the kingdom of heaven is going to be established on the earth. Okay, you're going to have the elect of the nation of Israel ruling. Okay, we're going to be ruling. Okay, let's go to Galatians, right? Because we're the ones that's going to receive those promises, right? Galatians chapter 3 and verse 29, and it says, and if ye be Yahushua's, then are ye Abraham's seed, and heirs according to the promise, right? The promise, right? And the promises, that's referring to the Israelites, okay? We're the ones that's going to receive those promises. Which I'll get out in Romans real quick. Which I'll get out of Romans real quick. This is Romans, Romans 9:4. It says, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law, and the service of the Most High and the promises. That's all given to Israel there. We the ones that's going to receive those promises. And when you go to Romans 8 and 17, going into those heirs of promise, right? Romans 8 and 17, and if the children there be heirs of the Most High and joint heirs with Yahushua, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. So this is talking about Israel, okay? This is all going into Israel here, okay? And we're going to be glorified together with Yahushua if we are the elect, all right? And this precept is bugging me, so I'm going to get it out. It's bugging my spirit really bad. Daniel 7, and I'm going to go straight to the point of the Messiah. Straight to the Messiah. I'll go right here. I'll start at verse 16. This is Daniel. This is Daniel 7 and 18. Daniel 7 and 18. It says, "But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever." Because we're going to have an everlasting kingdom, an everlasting salvation. So this is the last, captivity. Okay, this is the last captivity that we are in. Because after this captivity, we're going to be in captivity. Lord willing, we the elect. We're going to be ruling. Okay, we're going to be ruling. It says, "But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom," and the saints are the Israelites, right? It says, "And possess the kingdom forever and ever." Verse 19, it says, "Then I would know the truth, right, of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth was of iron, right, and whose nails of brass, right, which devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped with the residue with his feet," right? And we know that the fourth beast here is America. Okay, that's that fourth beast. Now, when you read up a couple of scriptures in verse 9, right, it talks about the Lord Yahushua, right? Let me get it. Let me go back to verse 9 real quick. Daniel 7 and 9. It says, "I beheld till the thrones were cast down, to the Ancient of Days did sit." Because the Ancient of Days did sit, because Yahushua is going to come back, and he's going to judge this place. He's going to judge this horde. There's a judgment that's coming to America, Babylon, the Great. Okay? And it says, "Whose garment was white as snow," right? "And the hair of his head like the pure wool." This is talking about the Heavenly Father. So the Heavenly Father, so-called black man, and only begotten Son is a so-called black man. "Of his head was like the pure wool." It says, "His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning flame," right? And the burning flame there, that's going into the chariots, referring to chariots. Okay, those are the burning flame there, right? It says, verse 10, it says, "A fiery stream issued and came forth before him," right? Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. It says, "The judgment was set, and the books were open." And this is going into that judgment. The Lord is going to establish that judgment on this place called America. There's a judgment coming for this world. This is going into that judgment, right? Verse 11, "And I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake," right? And it says, "I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given into burning flame," right? And ancient Rome wasn't destroyed by fire either. Okay, ancient Rome wasn't destroyed by fire. It didn't fall by fire. Okay, so we know that when we read the scripture here, it's talking about this place called America, which is known as the fourth beast, right? Which is the revival of the Roman Empire. Is going to be destroyed in thermonuclear fire. Okay, and that's what that's talking about. "I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame." Because the fourth beast, right? Ancient Rome didn't fall by fire. It wasn't destroyed by fire. But this place called America is going to be destroyed by fire. Okay, there's going to be a judgment coming for this horde. Okay, and that's how we know that this is talking about America here, because America is going to be destroyed by fire. What fire? Thermonuclear destruction. Okay, and it says, verse 12, "Ascending the rest of the beasts, they had dominion taken away." It says, "Yet their lives were prolonged for a season of time." All right, now I'm going to get down to the main point, because I want to get into the Messiah, right? And that's where I want to get to. Where is it at? So I want to get into that. Right? The visions. Okay. Bear with me. passages. I know it's in Daniel 7. Okay. I'll start at verse. Yeah, I'll start right here. This is I thought it was up, but I thought it was up. But I'll just get right here. This is Daniel 7 and verse 20, not 25. Verse 26, it says, "But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion and consume and to destroy it unto the end." It says, "And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people." It says, "Given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom." Right? And this is going into Yahushua, right? Because Yahushua, this is going to be a forever lasting kingdom. A kingdom that's not going to be taken down. A kingdom that's not going to be destroyed. This is a forever lasting kingdom. Okay? The elected nation of Israel, they're going to rule. Okay? And it says, "And all dominions shall serve and obey him." Yeah, that's the scripture I wanted to get. That's talking about the Messiah, right? So the Messiah, he's going to, right, like when he was on the earth in the flesh, he was not desired. Okay, he was despised and rejected of men. That's in Isaiah 53. But when the kingdom comes and Yahushua comes and destroys this place called America and set his kingdom on the planet Earth, right? He's going to be glorified. He's going to be desired. And the elect is going to reign with Yahushua. And we're going to be glorified together, right? We just read that in Romans 8 and 17. Okay? So reading it again. And it says, "And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints, who are the Israelites." Psalms 148 and 14. And it says shall be given to the Israelites, right? It says shall be given. It says shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is also is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. And there you go. You see that? So we're going to have an everlasting kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is going to be established on the earth. Let me get one more scripture. I feel like it wasn't enough to prove that. I think it's what, Isaiah 65 and 17, right? Let me see. Isaiah 65 and 17. Yeah. This is to prove too. I use Revelation 5 and 10, but I'll use Isaiah 65 and 17 as well. Isaiah 65 and 17. "For behold, I create a new heaven and a new earth, a new rulership." Right? It says, "And the former shall not be remembered nor come into mind." And there you go. Right? A new heaven and a new earth. That's a new rulership, which is going to be governed of Yahushua. And we read Revelations 5 and 10 that said that he shall reign on the earth. Right? Let me get it again, and then I'll wrap it up with that. Revelations 5 and 10. Revelation 5 and 10. And it says, Revelation 5 and 10, and it says, "And has made us unto our power kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth." So there you go, man. Summing all of this up, man. We went to the empires, went all the way into the divided kingdoms. I don't think I'm missing anything, right? No, I don't think I'm missing anything. So, hey, I want to give all honors and glories and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Wakakodash. Yahweh, which is the one true name of the Heavenly Father. Yahushai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one true name is Yahushai. Bahashem, meaning coming in the name. Ba means coming in. Ha means thus. Shah means name. Rakah meaning spirit. Kodash meaning holy. Double honors to the elders and the apostles and bishops of Great Millstone, who will well and teach well, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai. Peace, blessings, salutations to the whole elect. And shalom to you, sincere brothers that are scattered abroad, pushing forth this word in truth and sincerity. And shalom to you, sincere sisters that are listening in silence, as the scriptures command you to do so. I am the brother Mashiach Arazakah, and Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. On to the next one. Shalom. And again, to that brother, I'm already out here in the highways and byways. Again, there's people walking by. I just can't be in the sun because my phone will overheat. It's summertime. It's damn near 100 and something degrees. So, I teach right here for the shade, so my phone will overheat. But there is people out here. I mean, I don't need to prove it. I can see like 5 people walking around. Some of them is walking back this way. Some of them are coming down this way. You just don't see them because I have the camera literally facing me. I don't want to have it that way because there's no shade. So, hey, Lord willing, this lesson is edifying. On to the next one. Shalom.